Number 10. The Sea Peoples. The Sea Peoples are one of the least understood ancient civilizations that thrived in the Mediterranean region, but for only about 100 years. They sprang up in the year 1276 BC, and then mysteriously vanished in 1178 BC, though not before being one of the largest reasons for the Bronze Age collapse. The thing with the Sea Peoples is that they were less of a civilization and more of a confederacy. They were a group of naval raiders from coastal towns who got together and decided to cause mass mayhem. Specifically, they concentrated their destructive efforts on Egypt. Nobody knows exactly what ethnicity these people were, and our only sources of information come from Egyptian descriptions of battles in which sea people showed up and caused devastation. Historians believe they could have been rogue tribes from Mycenaean or even Minoan, but nobody really knows for sure. Ramesses II gave the most information on the Sea Peoples, describing how they completely annihilated them after they pillaged just about every major port in the Mediterranean. Before trying to invade Egypt, they did so much damage in the region, they caused an almost total collapse of civilization for hundreds of years. Number 9. The Mycenaeans. The Mycenaeans are an ancient civilization from what is today Greece. In fact, the Mycenaeans are considered to be the original Greek people. They were the first civilization to speak the Greek language, popping up on the Greek mainland somewhere around 1650 BC. Sure, they were influenced by the earlier Minoan civilization that lived on the island of Crete, copying much of the writing system, their social structure, and their artwork. But they were the original Greeks for all intents and purposes. Later on, when Greek civilization flourished, they would look back on the Mycenaeans as legends. They looked to their old palaces and megalithic structures and told stories of the lost civilization that came years before them. They even believed the Mycenaeans were a race of supergiants, since the palaces they built were so big, it seemed impossible for ordinary men to have constructed them. But like the Minoans who came before them, the Mycenaeans ultimately vanished from the history books. It wasn't until 1876 that the archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann discovered proof of the Mycenaeans high up in the Greek mountains. He uncovered artifacts of the lost civilization, as well as palaces and tombs. And thanks to him, we know exactly where the Greek culture comes from. Number 8. The Grand Canyon Forbidden Zone. In the year 1909, there was a newspaper article published by the Arizona Gazette stating that explorers in the Grand Canyon uncovered ancient artifacts from people in Egypt. The article explained that an explorer by the name of G.E. Kincaid, along with Smithsonian scientist S.A. Jordan, uncovered man-made tunnels deep in the Grand Canyon, filled with Egyptian relics. They uncovered golden urns, copper tools, hieroglyphics, and even mummies. At the time, these discoveries were labeled as proof that the ancient Egyptians had made their way to North America and started their own city in the Grand Canyon. But here's the deal. No one knows where any of those artifacts are today. Some theories say that the Smithsonian scientists came in and took every last scrap of evidence away. Though of course, the Smithsonian denies this fervently. They say the article was just 20th century nonsense. But the fact remains that there is a forbidden zone in the Grand Canyon, where ordinary people are not allowed to go. There are also no-fly orders over specific parts of the Grand Canyon, almost as if nobody wants ordinary people to see what's hidden in the deep valleys. What do you think is hiding in the Grand Canyon? Why do you think this information is kept so hush-hush? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 7. Where is Atlantis? One of the most mysterious civilizations is that of Atlantis. The island nation was first described by the Greek writer Plato 2,400 years ago. He described it as an imperial superpower of the ancient world, possessing one of the largest armies and some of the most advanced technologies of the day. But unfortunately for the Atlanteans, they fell out of favor with the gods, and their great island was tossed into the sea. For the last 2,000 years, there's been a lot of argument over whether Atlantis was a real civilization or not. Some claim it was simply a fictional city-state made up by Plato, while others believe it's very real. But if it's real, just where exactly is it? There are a few theories, though keep in mind none of them have ever been confirmed. Based on Plato's description of Atlantis, it was located somewhere near the Mediterranean Sea. It could have been on the island of Sardinia, Malta, Cyprus, Crete, or even Santorini. Some even believe Atlantis is on the bottom of the Cyprus Basin, undetectable under nearly a mile of water and thousands of tons of sediment. What do you think? Where could it be if it truly exists? Number 6. The Harappan. The Harappan civilization flourished between 3300 and 1300 BC, extending their great empire from modern Afghanistan to Pakistan, and even further into northwest India. You may also know them by their other name, the Indus River Valley Civilization. They were one of the most advanced people in the entire world, introducing a standardized system of weights and measurements for trade, learning how to work with copper and bronze, and creating their very own script. They also had unique systems of government, and like many of the ancient civilizations of the Old World, the Harappan vanished, probably because of climate change. The first trace of these ancient people was discovered in 1856 by British colonial officials overseeing the construction of a railway line that would connect the city of Lahore and Karachi. They found hundreds of thousands of bricks under the ground, which they actually used to help construct their own buildings. It wasn't until the 1920s that archaeologists really got involved and realized they were dealing with something big. After a lot of research, we now know today that the Indian civilization likely came from the Harappan. When their cities were abandoned around the year 1800, they likely migrated south and spread throughout India. Number 5. The Lost Civilization of Mew. Nobody knows if the mysterious land of Mew was ever actually a real place or not. First mention of this unknown land came from Augustus Laplungian after investigating Mayan ruins in Yucatan, eerie similarities between ruins in Mexico, Greece, and Egypt, and proposed there must have been a civilization that connected them. He proposed that there was once a large landmass in the Pacific Ocean called Mew, and it allowed contact between the civilizations of South America and those in the Mediterranean. Since then, many scholars have run with this idea, believing it was through the lost land of Mew that all these ancient cultures managed to come up with similar symbols, similar pieces of architecture, and almost identical myths. If real, the lost civilization of Mew would be a reasonable explanation for why there are so many historical coincidences all throughout the ancient world. But unfortunately, nobody has ever found evidence of this land. It's been compared to Atlantis, with many believing Mew sank long ago and is currently hidden somewhere deep in the Pacific Ocean. Number 4. The Buried Pyramid. A huge pyramid-like structure on the Indonesian island of Java may just be proof of a lost civilization. The mysterious structure was discovered atop Mount Padang, with some experts saying it could be one of the oldest megalithic sites on Earth. This place is so old that it's covered by a dense layer of soil, foliage, and even trees. It was likely built over 12,000 years ago, so nature has reclaimed it almost entirely. It was only found after workers took drilling samples from the top of the pyramid, which, from the outside, simply looks like a mountain. They found that below the vegetation and soil, there is a subterranean structure. Underneath the surface, about 10 feet down, was a second layer of similar rock columns, thought to be 7,500 to 8,300 years old. And a third layer, reaching 49 feet below the surface, is more than 9,000 years old. And according to researchers, it could even date to 28,000 years ago. Their study also detected multiple chambers underground. Unfortunately, nobody has really gone in to actually dig the pyramid out yet. It's still completely encased in soil. Plus, most mainstream scientists have yet to acknowledge that there is an ancient pyramid, over twice as old as those in Egypt, hiding on an Indonesian island. But according to Dani Natawijaja with the Research Center for Geotechnology at the Indonesian Institute for Sciences, the pyramid is legit. Dani has been studying it for years and believes it's evidence of a civilization from prehistory, an early group of humans that built structures thousands of years before any other group on Earth. They have no name. Nobody knows when they existed or where they went. And so far, this pyramid is the only proof we have that they were ever real. Number 3. The Aztecs. When Spanish forces arrived in Mexico in the year 1521, They did their best to wipe out just about everyone. This includes the most famous ancient civilization from what is today modern Mexico, the Aztec. We know that the crusading Spanish tore down their temples and built Christian churches over top of them. We know they slaughtered them by the thousands. But what you might not know is that the Aztec are still alive today. They just lived their lives a little differently than their ancestors did 5 centuries ago. The truth is that the Aztec people were not completely wiped out. Today, the descendants of the mighty Aztecs are called Nahua. There are more than 500,000 Nahua still living in small communities throughout rural Mexico. Far from the warriors they once were, these modern Aztecs spend their days farming and selling the traditional craft to tourists. They also no longer believe in the ancient Mesoamerican gods. Their beliefs have fused with Christianity, meaning that while they go to church, they also sometimes practice medicine by uttering incantations and participating in blood sacrifices. Though in modern times, they only sacrifice chickens, not people. Number 2. The Lost Civilizations of the Amazon. Thanks to satellite images, researchers have uncovered proof of an ancient civilization that once flourished deep in the Amazon jungle. In fact, there may even have been several different civilizations that lived here. Hundreds and hundreds of geometric shapes have been found in the Amazon basin, taking up an area of about 155 miles in any direction. These shapes are the leftovers of buildings and earthworks, and even roads connecting one village to another. Even though all traces of the original buildings are gone, their imprints remain. Scientists are now beginning to understand there was a major pre-Columbian power residing in the jungle as far back as 1250 AD. There may have been up to 1 million people living in the area, according to National Geographic. The big mystery now is trying to figure out what happened to these people. How did a civilization with a population of 1 million just vanish? Experts are still working to understand how the Amazonian civilization broke apart, resulting in hundreds of small tribes living primitive existences in the jungle for hundreds of years after. Number 1. Easter Island. The civilization of Easter Island has captured the imagination of scholars, archaeologists, and pretty much everyone on Earth. They are known as the Rapa Nui, and nobody really knows what happened to them. We know that they probably came from Polynesia or South America. But why a small group of people traveled 1,300 miles from the mainland to live on a small island only 64 square miles still baffles experts. The experts also don't understand why the natives moved here and then built giant stone statues, which you probably know as the Easter Island heads, all over the landscape. It was a remarkable achievement, but one that doesn't make a lot of sense. It's believed that the Easter Island people used so many resources to build the statues, what they called moai, that they actually ran out, ultimately leading to their decline. One of the main theories as to how the Rapa Nui people vanished comes from the geographer Jared Diamond. He claims that Rapa Nui is a perfect example of humans exploiting the natural resources to such a point that they can no longer sustain themselves. Basically, the island went from tens of thousands of people to a small population of only 1,500 by the time the Europeans discovered the island in the 18th century. They cut down the trees, ruined their fields, and ran out of wood, primarily because they were so obsessed with building the huge statues. What's your favorite lost civilization? Number 9. Encyclopedia Obscura. Mythical creatures are considered fictional. Many originated from people's misunderstandings of real plants, animals, places, and even other humans. But is it possible that any of them actually exist? The Maryland Cryptid Museum in London thinks so. It claims to own a collection of cryptid corpses, including aliens, dragons, mermaids, gnomes, fairies, vampires, and more. The dead creatures were supposedly found in boxes in the basement of a mansion owned by an eccentric cryptozoologist named Thomas Theodore Maryland. Whether or not they're actually real is a matter of speculation. But the collection is not open to the public, leaving us to guess based on photos. The museum's Encyclopedia Obscura contains descriptions of all the items in its collection and key players in the cryptozoology realm. It describes Maryland as a man who spent his life searching for cryptids. He opened the original museum, but it was met with widespread disapproval, and turned into an orphanage. Marilyn was allegedly never seen again after that. After the photos appeared online, people figured out that they were posted by a sculptor and photographer known as Alex C.F. It appears as though the backstory and cryptid corpses were a historical hoax. But to some people, this doesn't mean the creatures don't exist or that there's no truth to the Encyclopedia Obscura. Number 8. Devil's Bible. Measuring nearly 3 feet long, the Codex Gigas is the world's largest existing medieval manuscript. It's nicknamed the Devil's Bible and dates back to the 13th century. This huge book contains the Old and New Testaments, as well as numerous short texts about matters that were relevant at the time, including calendars, exorcisms, grammar, and medical topics. It's filled with disturbing artwork, including at least one full-color rendering of the devil himself, hence its nickname. Researchers believe that a monk hand-wrote the Codex Gigas without anyone's help, but they don't really know who he was, and it would have been a massive undertaking for one person to create the entire manuscript. The National Library of Sweden explains on its website that it would have taken someone 5 years to write the book if they wrote for 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. Assuming the writer was a monk who was busy with his monastic duties and could only write for 3 hours a day, it would have taken him 10 years to complete the Codex Gigas. The mysterious manuscript was originally stored in a Benedictine monastery in what is now the Czech Republic. It's currently on display at the National Library of Sweden in Stockholm. Number 7. Ora Linda Book. During the 1860s, the public learned of a manuscript called the Ora Linda Book. It's written in a West Germanic language called Old Frisian, which was used between the 8th and 16th centuries. The book is said to cover historical, mythological, and religious themes of the Frisian people between 2194 BC and 803 AD. It includes details about numerous alleged catastrophes and mentions the so-called Lost City of Atlantis. After the book's existence became widely known, a controversy ensued over its authenticity, or lack thereof. Toward the end of the 19th century, most people believed that it was a recently produced forgery. The debate re-emerged in 1922, over 40 years later, when a Dutch philologist named Herman Wirth became preoccupied with the Ora Linda Book. In 1933, he published a German translation, and it quickly became a topic of fascination for Heinrich Himmler, a leading member of the Nazi Party, earning the book the nickname Himmler's Bible. Himmler and Wirth founded a think tank called Ahnenerbe. It was dedicated to promoting Hitler's racial theories, with a special focus on the idea that Germans were descended from a biologically superior ancient Aryan race. While some high-ranking Germans supported the Ora Linda Book's role in Nazi occultism, others rejected it. A respected expert named Arthur Hubner dismissed the manuscript as a forgery, and that pretty much ended Himmler and Wirth's use of it as a tool for teaching Nazi ideology. Most modern experts agree that the Ora Linda Book is a hoax, but nobody knows who wrote it or why. In 2004, Dutch linguist Goffe Jensma proposed that it's a parody of the Christian Bible. He believes it became popular after readers missed any clues that it was satirical in nature, and used it as a basis for spreading occultist beliefs. Number 6. The Uranatia Book. Sometime between 1924 and 1955, a religious work called the Uranatia Book appeared in Chicago. Nobody knows who wrote it. It used the name Uranatia for planet Earth, and its stated intention is to present enlarged concepts and advanced truth. The nearly 2,000-page book dives into some deep concepts about God, Jesus, the meaning of life, philosophy, science, and more. It aims to unite these things and is written as if it's coming directly from a celestial being. Unlike other accounts of Jesus, the Uranatia Book states that Jesus was conceived traditionally rather than immaculately, and that he didn't perform the miracles the Bible speaks of. It describes God as the creator and upholder of reality, as well as a father figure. According to the book's teachings, God lives in a place called the Isle of Paradise, in the center of an eternal universe known as Havona, which contains 1 billion perfect worlds. Uranatia is described as a confused and disordered planet that is intellectually and spiritually behind compared to other inhabited worlds, due to our spiritual leaders' tendency to rebel and default from religious truths. The story of the book's origins claims that a couple named William and Lena Sadler, who were both doctors, were approached by a concerned neighbor whose husband fell into a deep sleep where he would breathe abnormally. He also spoke of messages he said he received from otherworldly beings, which he eventually started to write down. William Sadler never revealed the man's name, and he said that the book's author, the entity that allegedly communicated with the man, didn't want any humans to know who they were. A US-based nonprofit called the Uranage Foundation published the book. When a woman named Kristen Mahira distributed free copies of it in 1991, the organization sued her for violating its copyright. A court decided that the copyright had expired and ruled in Mahira's favor, but the Uranage Foundation appealed and won. Then in 2001, a jury found that the group's copyright was invalid after 1983. Some people believed that the Uranage book is a hoax, which is understandable, given the cryptic nature of its author. Number 5. Smithfield the Cral. In 1230, Pope Gregory IX ordered his chaplain to put together a new collection of canonical laws, known as the Decretals. These were standard documents meant for anyone studying canonical law. They would have normally been very cut and dry, perhaps even boring. There are an estimated 675 surviving handwritten copies of the Decretals, but one specific copy, called the Smithfield Decretals, is noticeably different. It's filled with more drawings than any other copy, with most images depicting Pope Gregory IX with his supporters. But that's not even the weirdest part. The margins on each page were left blank so that future users could make notes. Around 1340, the Smithfield Decretals fell into the hands of someone in London or elsewhere in eastern England, who paid artists to add more illustrations to it. They fill the margins with bizarre drawings that seem unrelated to the text or are critical of canonical law, including images of knights battling giant snails. At the time, this type of artwork was trending in England, but modern scholars struggle to understand most of it, including the pictures of knights fighting snails, which was apparently a common image that was seen in places other than the Decretals. One theory, proposed by expert Lillian Randall, suggests that the snails represent the Lombards, a Germanic tribe who were seen as deceitful and treasonous, slimy if you will. But there's very little evidence to back up this claim, especially since the snails usually seem victorious in the drawings. Another theory proposes that the snails represent the people who have achieved upward nobility, who've climbed from a low-ranking social status to an elite position. The snail's victory could be seen as an ordinary person's defeat against a noble individual. In a Tales of Times Forgotten article, Spence McDaniel theorizes that the illustrations are meant to be funny, that seeing a high-ranking knight defeated by a creature that was typically easy to kill was amusing. There are other unexplained pictures in the Smithfield Decretals, including a fox dressed as a bishop lecturing to birds, bears fighting unicorns, and sexually explicit drawings, like a man grabbing a woman's buttocks, and we can speculate about their meaning, but it's unlikely that we'll ever know exactly what the creators were thinking. Number 4. Rohon Codex. The Rohon Codex is a 448-page manuscript that surfaced in Hungary during the 19th century. Its author is unknown, and it's written in an unknown language and writing system. Nobody knows where it originated, although it appears to come from somewhere in Central or Eastern Europe. Almost all the book's images are biblical in nature, containing elements of Christianity, Islam, and possibly Hinduism. They include depictions of Jesus on the cross, Moses on Mount Sinai, and more. The artwork suggests that the Rohon Codex is about religion. Perhaps it's a heretical doctrine written by a dissenter, as von Klaus Schmer pointed out in a German science blog's article. For over 150 years, experts and amateurs alike tried and failed to decipher the code of the Rohon Codex. Some believe that it's an old writing system that nobody's figured out yet. Others have proposed that it's a hoax, or something that was written just to sell to a collector for a high price. Hungarian historian Kartali Szabo named Samuel Literati Nemes, an antiquarian known for creating forgeries, as the possible mastermind behind the Rohon Codex. Nemes was incredibly skilled in his craft, and is known to have stumped even the most renowned scholars with his work. Most experts believe that the Codex is fake. There's no evidence connecting it specifically to Nemes, and while several people have claimed to decode it, none of their theories have been accepted as fact. Number 3. Voik Manuscript. Often described as the world's most mysterious book, the Voik Manuscript is a 15th century codex written in an unknown language that hasn't been seen in any other known artifacts. Its author's identity is also a mystery. In addition to its bizarre lettering, the Voynich manuscript contains elaborate artwork depicting strange plants, naked women, zodiac symbols, unknown constellations, and more. The book has been discovered and rediscovered several times throughout history. It most recently resurfaced in 1912 when a rare books dealer named Wilfrid Voynich came across it. The Voynich manuscript has also appeared in the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II's personal library, and in 1903, it was sold at a secret book sale by the Society of Jesus in Rome. One theory holds that the manuscript may have been written in northern Italy during the Italian Renaissance. Some even allege that it's nothing more than a Renaissance-era hoax, or that Wilfrid Voynich himself created it. But without knowing what it says, it's unlikely that we'll ever know who wrote it, where, or why. Anyone who wants to try decoding the book can buy a copy, but even expert codebreakers from both world wars failed to figure it out. So good luck. Number 2. Kodak Seraphinianus. The 360-page Kodak Seraphinianus was first published in 1981. Created by Italian architect-turned-artist Luigi Serafini, it's perhaps best described as an encyclopedia of an imaginary world. It's written in an imaginary language and contains more hand-drawn images of strange plants, animals, machines, vehicles, food, and more. One drawing shows a couple making love while transforming into a crocodile. Another shows a man riding his own coffin. Serafini explained that the text has no meaning. It's asemic, which means that it creates a vacuum of meaning that the reader is left to interpret. He said that he made the bizarre book to convey what it was like for him to open an encyclopedia for the first time as a young boy, before he learned how to read. While the writing clearly made sense to adults, he didn't understand it, and he designed the Codex Seraphinianus to reflect that sensation. Number 1. The Book of Soga. Also called the Aldaria, the Book of Soga is a 16th century book on magic. It was lost for centuries after the death of its owner, an Elizabethan mathematician and occultist named John Dee. A scholar recovered 2 manuscripts in the British Library Archives in 1994. The nearly 200-page book consists of incantations and instructions on summoning demons, doing magic, astrology, and other things. Some of it is written in Latin, but the final 18 pages contain over 40,000 letters arranged throughout 36 tablets. They appear to be some kind of code that hasn't yet been deciphered. After finding the book in 1551, John Dee tried to figure out what it meant by hiring a medium to consult the Archangel Uriel. The medium told Dee that only the Archangel Michael knows the Book of Soga's secret meaning, and failed to decode any hidden message it might contain. Dee walked away without any useful information. At the time, he was trying to pursue his idea to establish a national English library for Queen Mary. Using his own money, Dee amassed England's largest library. In total, he collected at least 3,000 printed volumes and many manuscripts. Historian and novelist Deborah Harkness began her search for the Book of Soga while studying John Dee's diaries. She found it in the British Library's archives under its alternative title, Aldaria Siva Soga Vocor. Several other scholars had tried to locate the book before Harkness hit pay dirt. A scholar named Jim Reeds figured out the mathematical formula that was used to construct the 36 tables that encompassed the letters. He also identified errors that the book scribes made during the copying process, but he did not decode the actual content of the tables or their significance, which remain a mystery to this day. Number 8. Russian Family of Skeletons. A shocking discovery made at a site in Phanagoria offers a unique glimpse into a sinister family history. While excavating at a well-preserved necropolis in Russia, archaeologists unearthed the bodies of an entire family that dates back to the 5th century. Inside the crypt, the skeletal remains of a wealthy warrior were found lying beside his wife and their 3 children. All of the bodies were found in a confined space, side by side with pottery, placed on either side of them as offerings. So, what could have been the cause of their deaths? Could it have been an attack from the nomadic tribes? Or is it possible the family died from the plague? Multiple questions swirled around the archaeological dig, with experts realizing that because the bodies were buried so deep, more than 16 feet below the surface, it may mean the male was a warrior, which gave his family high status and would have allowed his wife and children to be buried alongside him with honor. A number of items found in the crypt gave experts more evidence that the man served in the city's army. Riding stirrups and spurs, as well as a leather harness attached to a belt that would have been used to carry a sword, were found on the male skeleton. Eagle-eyed archaeologists noticed that the leather harness and the buckles were very worn out, which meant he would have had to sheath and unsheath his sword over and over again while fighting. The capital of the Bosporan Kingdom, Fangoria, was an important center of trade between the southern Caucasus and Matoan marshes. Located at an important trade route near the Black Sea, it would have been an area that experienced a lot of turmoil and conflict, which may be why the Russian warrior was such a celebrated person to receive the honorable burial. It's also possible that the warrior and his entire family were butchered by the nomadic tribes, who often warred with the locals. Archaeologists will continue to study the remains and look for the telltale signs of either disease or violence to discover the circumstances that led to the burial of an entire family that remains a mystery. Number 7. Transylvanian urns. It isn't that uncommon for skeletons to be buried with objects that either celebrate their lives or are to be used in the afterlife. But a group of skeletons unearthed in a 6,000-year-old Transylvanian cemetery had an unusual surprise for archaeologists. The deceased were buried with urns placed over their skulls, or sometimes their feet. Researchers who discovered the unique burials while working at the excavation believed they were offerings for the afterlife. The settlement where they were found was a fairly sophisticated one that had traces of wooden walls to fortify the homes of the Stone Age inhabitants. But the contents of the jars remained a mystery, with researchers unable to figure out what was inside. What do you think the ancient people would have buried with their dead? Could it be gifts of food, something that was often buried with ancient people? Or could the deceased have been fed a final meal before ritual sacrifice? With 2 different settlements found at the site, it's not that easy to figure out. One of the settlements was from the Neolithic era, dated to about 6,000 years ago, and the other was a Celtic settlement built on top of the original one about 2,000 years ago. Until researchers can determine whether there was food or drink inside the urns, we are left to wonder about the burial practices of ancient people, and if the offerings were a tribute or for them to use in the afterlife. Number 6. Early cave art. Deep in the Borneo jungle, scientists have identified ancient figurative art that depicts animals long lost to time. Inside a hidden cave, researchers found stark drawings that feature haunting ancient hand stencils that date between 13,000 and 20,000 years ago. Along with the strange hand illustrations, scientists also identified unsettling depictions of human figures painted onto the walls. Without much evidence of what happened to the Ice Age artists in Borneo, these paintings remain pretty mysterious, and unless scientists can figure out exactly how old the paintings are, they could be lost to time. As experts work to pinpoint how old the paintings are before they deteriorate, we are equally as excited about these examples of the world's oldest figurative art. Previously, older man-made images that have been found only showed lines and abstract patterns. So, many archaeologists were stunned to discover these paintings, because they show that Homo sapiens in ancient times were well aware of not only themselves, but the world around them. Even more astonishing is the fact that this shift in figurative art was happening in the remote Borneo cave around the same time it was happening in Asia and Europe. But uncovering this previously unknown cave art was a grueling task for archaeologists who had to travel deep into the rainforest by canoe and backpack the rest of the way through the thick brush to get to the out-of-the-way cave where the stunning rock art was found. As they continue to study the hand stencils and other paintings found on the rock walls, researchers are experiencing the lives of the ancient people who left a lasting legacy deep in the rainforest. Number 5. Skeleton lovers were male. Some say that love never dies, and with the case of a pair of skeletons found in 2009 in the Italian city of Modena. A stark example of this belief stunned archaeologists. While digging beneath the Italian city, archaeologists came across a breathtaking sight. Two 1,500-year-old skeletons fossilized together and holding hands, with their faces staring into one another. It was a heartbreaking and chilling discovery. But there were more surprises to be found as workers continued to excavate. After getting a closer look at the skeletons, who had now been nicknamed the Lovers of Modena, archaeologists were in for a shock. Both skeletons were male. Originally, one of the skeletons was identified as female because it was wearing a bronze ring on one finger. But after testing the tooth enamel of both the skeletons, researchers declared that both skeletons were in fact men. So were they cousins? Brothers? It's possible, given the fact that one was wearing a ring, that the unfortunate skeletons belonged to male lovers. Surprisingly, this isn't the first skeleton pair to be found in such a position. Previously, two 6,000-year-old skeletons found in northern Italy holding hands were in fact a male and a female. Either way, the discovery of the Lovers of Modena shows that a bond between individuals is never broken, and love can indeed endure forever. Hey, real quick, if you're new to this channel, welcome. Thanks for checking us out. What do you think of the video so far? Let us know in the comments down below, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 4. Hidden Egyptian Crypt. It isn't uncommon for archaeologists working in Egypt to find previously unknown tombs and temples. But in 2019, while working at the site of a royal temple, archaeologists from New York uncovered a mysterious structure at the ancient site of Abydos. Once a very important city, Abydos is home to the tombs of several early kings. When archaeologists were working on excavating a temple, they stumbled upon a hidden stone walkway that would lead them to a building with a remarkably well-preserved cartouche. Understandably, the researchers were incredibly excited, and as they studied the cartouche, which is a hieroglyphic that shows a building or temple belonging to royalty, they realized that it spelled out the name of one of Egypt's most important pharaohs, Ramesses II. Found about 300 miles south of Cairo, Abydos has a number of tombs where pharaohs from the earliest dynasties are buried. But the discovery of this hidden Egyptian palace at the royal temple of Ramesses II is one that will change history. The very fact that Ramesses would require a palace in the ancient city shows that he didn't just see it as a site for temples and crypts. He saw the importance of having a permanent place to rule Egypt, and because of that, he constructed the impressive palace. It was no ordinary temple either. Its cornerstones were decorated with royal symbols, etchings that would help researchers to understand not only why temples of this period were so important, but how some of Egypt's most important pharaohs ruled their military campaigns to retain their power. Number 3. Ancient Teeth. Large funerary temples aren't the only important historical finds made by archaeologists. When a research group in Germany stumbled upon a set of teeth, they didn't realize that they may be rewriting human history. Never before seen in either Europe or Asia, the 9-million-year-old teeth were found in a dried-up riverbed in Germany's Rhineland. Stunningly, the teeth resemble some that were found belonging to the first humanoid skeletons that were discovered in Africa. But how did the unique fossils get there? After sifting through gravel and sand in the riverbed, scientists unearthed the teeth, and after studying them further, they realized they may be 9.5 million years old. That would make them 4 million years earlier than the oldest hominin species ever discovered in Africa. But that doesn't make the mystery about how the teeth got there any easier to solve. The expedition leader was understandably puzzled about how the teeth so closely resembled those found in Africa that were 2.5 million years younger. Little did experts realize that after uncovering the mysterious teeth, they could quite possibly be rewriting the history of mankind. Because scientists were so shocked by the find, they decided to keep the discovery secret for over a year before publishing it. A director at the National History Museum in Germany believes these are the teeth of an ancient ape, but he still can't explain how the fossils that so closely resemble those in Africa were found in a river in Germany. Over the years, there's been a lot of fossil evidence found, that showed great apes roamed Europe millions of years ago. But because there have been no confirmed cases found on the continent of hominins, a species that were closely related to humans, researchers now realize that the work truly begins to unravel the mystery of those ancient fossils. Number 2. Neanderthal fused to walls. While most archaeologists realize it can be quite a task to uncover fossils buried underground for centuries, they didn't realize that a discovery made in southern Italy in 2015 would reveal one of the most startling examples of ancient remains. Found inside the walls of the cave in southern Italy, the bones of an unidentified individual were unlike any other bones ever discovered. Found in a sinkhole, the skeleton wasn't what you or I might picture. The bones were found sticking out from the limestone rock. They were covered with stalactites that were left behind by water that dribbled down the cave walls to where the body remained. It took thousands of years for the growths to fuse the bones into the limestone walls of the cave. So when archaeologists uncovered the skeleton, they were shocked by the Neanderthal who was entombed in limestone by hundreds of small stone formations. Originally discovered in 1993, the skeleton is believed to belong to a Neanderthal whose DNA is the oldest ever extracted by researchers. But it took a lot of effort and careful examination for archaeologists to determine not only how long the body was down there, but whether it was a male or female who had unfortunately fallen in. It would take only a tiny piece of the skeleton's shoulder bone for researchers at the University of Rome to extract mitochondrial DNA, later matching it to other Neanderthal skeletons in their catalog. This gave them the ability to date the bones to between 172,000 and 130,000 years ago. As it turns out, that was around the same time when ice sheets were expanding significantly out of Antarctica and Greenland, which could possibly be the reason why the unfortunate Neanderthal ended up in the hole in the first place. During massive environmental shifts, it's possible that he fell into a cave that was lurking in the limestone underground. Luckily, experts were able to extract DNA samples from the skeleton, later realizing they had found the most ancient Neanderthal DNA that has ever been extracted. It may also give scientists new evidence into the evolution of hominids and how early Neanderthals moved across Europe during prehistoric times. Number 1. Cabayan mummy caves. Many cultures around the world mummified their dead, but unlike the ancient Egyptians, who removed the internal organs of the deceased and covered the bodies in gauze, the mummies of the Philippines were preserved in a very different way, with fire. The Cabayan people have a strange ancient rite to honor their dead. To preserve the bodies, the people of the Cabayan region use fire to dehydrate and smoke their dead. Then they store them in caverns 4,000 feet up the side of a mountain. As death approached, the unfortunate individual who was on his last breath would drink a beverage that had a high concentration of salt that would help to dehydrate the body and start the drying process before they actually died. Then, after the person died, his fellow tribesmates would thoroughly wash the body and place it in a seated position over a smoldering fire that would help to dehydrate the soft tissue. Going one step further, those attending to the body would dry the internal organs by blowing smoke directly into the mouth of the deceased to help remove all of its internal fluids. The final step of this unique mummification process included rubbing the body with herbs and then placing the body into one of the caves. Even today, remarkably well-preserved mummies remain in the caves where they were placed. The Cabayan people are a superstitious group, so they usually place their mummies in remote caves to prevent theft. But that didn't stop looters from stealing one of the mummies, like the one that went missing in the early 1900s. During that time, the body of the head of the Apu Anu tribe was stolen. Soon after, a number of natural disasters, including earthquakes, droughts, and poor harvest, plagued the village. Luckily for the Cabayan, the mummy was later returned and reburied in the hopes of restoring the balance to the tribe. To prevent further thefts, the caves were declared a protected site that not only keeps the location of the mummies a secret, but also helps to prevent future looting. A striking example of a sacred burial process, the mummies are not only important to the tribe, but a superstitious ritual that still puzzles outsiders. Thanks for watching. What did you think of these mysterious archaeological discoveries? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time. Bye.